Well, good afternoon, everyone. Some encouraging news. The growth in the number of cases continues to be at very welcome low levels, and we want to thank all Australians again for the great efforts that they're putting in. It's testing their patience, we understand that, and their patience is proving up to the mark, and we are still very much in the middle of combating this terrible virus, as we're seeing all around the world. But here in Australia, we're doing better than most, better than many, and we need to keep doing that. And so we thank Australians for the great support and the efforts that they're putting in as we go through these very difficult times. About 2/3 of the cases in Australia have now been able to overcome and to recover from those cases. So we have active cases of less than about 2,500 now. Overseas experience, even the most cautious and careful of nations such as Singapore, demonstrates that none of us can be complacent about these issues, and we need to maintain the efforts that we're putting in place. Singapore now has, sadly, more cases than Australia, after some very strong early successes, and it's a reminder that even a country as diligent and as careful as Singapore have been, that none of us can be complacent about this virus. As I've said on many occasions, it writes its own rules, and we need to ensure that we are continually up to the mark in our response. It means we need to stick to our plan, and that was very much the view of National Cabinet today. We've got to stick to our plan. Our plan is working, our plan is saving lives, and it's saving livelihoods. So we need to stick to that plan, and we need to stick together in ensuring we maintain the implementation of that plan right across the country. For those who are asking, when can we ease? Well, we were pretty clear about that last week. We laid down some clear markers as to what the requirements would be. We said there needed to be an effective rate of transmission less than the score of 1. And we said we need to get in place over these 4 weeks that we're now in, we're almost 1 week down in that timetable, of testing, tracing and a response capability on the ground. National Cabinet will continue to look at those areas that may be able to be eased at the end of that period when we look at those issues. But they are the clear markers, they are the clear prerequisites. There's no uncertainty about that. I think that's very clear. An effective rate of transmission consistently under 1, and putting in place the testing and tracing and response capabilities that are necessary for us to stay on top of any outbreak or any risks that could emerge when we moved into a period where we may be able to ease those restrictions. And states and territories in the meantime, where they have taken actions on restrictions that go beyond the national baselines, as we've already seen Western Australia do, then they will take decisions over the next few weeks that may see them ease back on some of those restrictions where they are above the national baselines in terms of those issues. Today we considered a number of measures and areas, and the first of those was in relation to elective surgery, which I flagged at the last media conference. Today we agreed to lift restrictions on elective surgery after Anzac Day, after the long weekend. This will not mean an immediate return to normal with elective surgery, but a gradual restart, subject to, of course, to capacity and other constraints that may exist in each jurisdiction. And the Minister for Health will outline that one of the reasons why we've been able to do that is the increase in the amount of personal protective equipment that we've been able to secure. The Chief Medical Officer will also make commentary on that. But we will be easing the restrictions on the following areas, and that is all Category 2 or equivalent procedures in the private sector, and selected Category 3 and other procedures, which includes all IVF, all screening programs where they have ceased, and I want to stress that the National Cabinet, indeed the HPPC, has never recommended any easing of screening tests or procedures, but where they have been eased, then they can be restarted. Post-cancer reconstruction procedures such as breast reconstruction, dental and level 2 restrictions, such as fitting dentures, braces, non-high-speed drilling and basic fillings. All procedures for children under the age of 18, all joint replacements including knees, hips and shoulders, all cataracts and eye procedures, all endoscopy and colonoscopy, and all of these measures will be further subject to review on the 11th of May to determine if all surgeries and procedures can then recommence more broadly. We estimate that this will lead to a reopening of around 25% of activity in elective surgery in our private and public hospitals, that of the capacity that had been closed because of the earlier restrictions. Priority will be given with this reopening on the basis of clinical determinations by the relevant health professionals, and that will occur in both the public and private system. This is an important decision because it marks another step on the way back. There is a road back, there is a road ahead, and the decision that the National Cabinet has taken today is evidence of that. This wouldn't be possible if we were not able to secure the additional PPE, and it also wouldn't be possible if we weren't able to have confidence about the level of of cases that have been identified in Australia, and the slowing that rate of growth down to very minimal levels. And so this is an indication to Australians that when we do keep staying ahead of this, then we can make these changes and we can start heading back to where we'd all like to be. On aged care, we reviewed recent events in a number of aged care facilities and took the lessons from those cases. And an important one is the finding was that we are very concerned about the impact of restrictions that have been put in place in aged care facilities over and above what was recommended by the National Cabinet on the residents in those facilities. There is great concern that the isolation of elderly people in residential care facilities where they have been prevented from having any visits from loved ones and support people is not good for their well-being, is not good for their health. And so the National Cabinet agreed that there needs to be a strong reminder that the National Cabinet decision was not to shut people off or to lock them away in their rooms. That was never the recommendation or the advice of the National Cabinet. The advice, I think, was very clear about ensuring that there could be visits of 2 a day, close relatives and support people, that this would be undertaken in the residents' rooms, but otherwise residents would able to be in other parts of the facility. They could sit in common rooms, they could sit in outdoor areas of these facilities, and we would like as many freedoms to be extended to residents in aged care facilities as is possible. And there is no recommendation from the medical expert panel that they should be confined in that way. Where further restrictions should be put in place in aged care facilities is where you may have an outbreak in that facility, or indeed an outbreak in the area in which the facility is located. So there are exceptional circumstances where further restrictions might be placed on people living in residential aged care facilities in terms of access to visitors. But those additional restrictions are the exception. They are not the rule, and we think it is a good thing for people to have those visits in accordance with those screening procedures and other things that are necessary to protect elderly residents in those situations. It shouldn't be done out of the convenience of isolation in terms of how these facilities are run. It should be done always only in the interests of the care of those who are living in those facilities. I also stress that the same applies, as we confirmed today, around the states and territories, that for older people who are self-isolating, that doesn't mean that for care and compassionate reasons that they can't receive visits from those who would normally provide that care. That might be a relative, that might be a carer, it might be a friendly neighbour who regularly looks in on someone. I mean, Jen just went and visited someone the other day for that purpose, and the visit was well received. And this is important, I think, for the mental health and well-being of particularly elderly residents in our community. I know that Australians are doing a great job. They're ringing them up, they're sending them notes, and they're making them meals and things like this, and that's wonderful. And there should be the obvious constraints on that. We're not saying there should be 50 people going through an elderly resident's home on a daily basis. Of course not. those visits should be limited just to those who would normally be looking in on people and taking good care of them. And so we just want to remind people that is still a interaction that we think is positive and that we also believe is safe. On schools, National Cabinet was keen to reinforce the point, as was made last week, that the health advice is not in relation to schools that a 4 square metre per person rule be enforced in classrooms. That is not the advice of the medical expert panel, and any suggestion that this is a requirement for schools is not the case. The recommendation was smaller class sizes, not smaller class rooms, smaller class sizes, and that those smaller class sizes is something that can be practically addressed at the school level. But there is no requirement from the medical expert panel that there be a 4 square metre per person rule enforced in those classrooms. Finally, we also today had the opportunity to brief the National Cabinet on the app, which many of you are aware that we've been working on for some time. It was good to provide that update, and we've been working closely with the states and territories on that app, and was pleased that it received in principle support from the National Cabinet. There are a few more hurdles for this to clear as we address the many issues that are associated with this, but it was absolutely seen as an important tool of many to help health workers in states and territories in the important work of determining contacts of those who may have been in close proximity to people who have contracted the coronavirus. This does 3 things. It firstly protects Australians in their own health and those of their own family by participating in this process. Secondly, it helps other Australians to keep them safe. And thirdly, it ensures that we can more effectively get back to a more normal setting where we have widespread take-up of this app. And we'll be saying more about that when we're in a position to launch that app in the not-too-distant future. Just finally, before I throw to the Minister for Health and then, of course, Professor Murphy, I updated the National Cabinet today that we have now processed since the 16th of March 517,000 job seeker claims. And by the end of this week, we'll have processed as many job seeker claims in 6 weeks than we will normally do in the entirety of the year. And I think that is an extraordinary effort by those working in the Department of Government Services and Centrelink. As I said, some 6,000 people in addition have been put into that program to ensure that we're able to move through that work. There's still a fair bit of work to go there, but having now eclipsed more than 500,000 people, that is obviously of great concern, and that's 500,000 people who are needing that payment and needing that support. But what it does is it reinforces that both the job seeker and the job keeper payments work together to provide the necessary income support for Australians who find themselves out of work or those who are on reduced hours or who are being stood down through the course of the coronavirus crisis. Additionally, stimulus payments of some $4.5 billion and the $750 payments has been paid as of yesterday to just under 6 million Australians, and the rest will flow in coming days. And so with that, I'll pass over to the Minister for Health and then Professor Murphy.
Thanks very much to Prime Minister and to Professor Murphy. Today is an important day on the road back. There is progress on all 3 fronts, on containment, capacity and recovery. And it's the progress on those first 2 fronts of containment and capacity which allow us to take these steps on the road to recovery through greater freedoms and opportunities for elective surgery, which will mean such an enormous amount to Australians in need of health assistance. In terms of containment, with regards to our first pillar, our border measures, we reviewed and extended the current prohibitions on travel into and out of Australia yesterday. Secondly, with regards to our testing, we have, as of early this morning, 434,000 tests completed in Australia, and as was noted by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine last week, it remains at the global forefront in terms of the accuracy of our testing, which is just a tribute to all of our pathologists and our state systems and territory systems and the cooperation with the Commonwealth around the country. In terms of tracing, we continue to follow up all of the cases that we possibly can, and the goal of the app, of course, is to assist with the protection of ourselves, our families, our health workers, and to assist that process of tracing, which has been going on since the very first case was found in Australia back on the 25th of January. And then in terms of distancing, what Australians have been doing in a very consistent way across the country has led to a real flattening of the curve. I would say now, building on what I said on the weekend, that we now have a sustained and consolidated flattening of the curve. Less than 1% growth in cases for 9 consecutive days, and over the last 3 days we have averaged less than 0.5% of growth in new cases. This is a collective national achievement. It's our doctors and our nurses, our pathology workers, but it's every Australian that's been contributing, and I want to say thank you for what people have done. You're the ones that have made this happen. You're the ones that have helped Australia lead the world, as well as with those other containment measures. Those containment measures, though, are still important. As the Prime Minister mentioned, even a country as cautious, successful and sophisticated as Singapore has seen an outbreak on a very large scale. And so we have to keep doing what we're doing because these measures save lives and protect lives, but they also allow us to achieve the road back at an earlier time. If we can hold, practice, continue our distancing measures, it will put us in a stronger position to be on the road back earlier. In terms of the capacity that the Prime Minister mentioned, with regards to our primary care, we've been very successful with over 4.7 million telehealth consultations. In particular, though, what we've been able to do is to secure the masks and the PPE that are critical for the protection of our health workers, which in turn means that we can take steps such as the recovery on elective surgery. We have secured and delivered into Australia 60 million masks. That's allowed for 22 million distributions, with another 11.5 million masks to be distributed over the coming week. And we have secured a further 100 million masks over the coming 6 weeks. That means that we are in a position now to support elective surgery. Equally, what the Prime Minister has mentioned with regards to aged care, making sure that there's support for the residents with helping to decrease their isolation, whilst there's support for our aged care workers by increasing the testing capacity and focus on our aged care workers to give them that protection, to protect their residents that they care and work so hard for. And this is an extremely important combination. And in terms of our hospitals, we have now had delivered 3,260 ventilators in the last week and a half from a great Australian company, ResMed. That's 3,000 non-invasive and 260 invasive ventilators. We have now achieved our national goal of full capacity of 7,500 ventilators. That's an extraordinary achievement across our hospitals, across the country. All of this means we're in a position to start the recovery. And today's announcement, the decision of the National Cabinet, the announcement of the Prime Minister, that not only can all of Category 1 elective surgery continue, but that Category 2 and urgent Category 3 can proceed on a 1 in 4 basis approximately, will mean an immense difference for families, whether it's in terms of IVF, whether it's in terms of dental pain, whether it's in terms of orthopaedic procedures or other procedures. It's going to mean a real difference to their quality of life. It's a result of what Australians have done with containment. It's a result of what we've been able to do in assisting Australians with capacity, and it's a very important day on the road back.
Thanks, Brett. Professor Murphy.
Thanks, PM and Minister. I'll be brief. Just on elective surgery, one of the things that's concerned the health profession generally during this pandemic has been the lack of attention to non-COVID related medical conditions. We have said previously we're really keen for people to not stop seeing their doctors for their chronic medical conditions, continue to get that clinical advice, whether it's by telemedicine or, if necessary, face-to-face. And the same applies to elective surgery. Some people think elective surgery sounds like it's something that's not important. It is incredibly important. Some elective surgery is life-saving. It really means all surgery that's not urgent. So some people are seriously disabled with hip and knee problems. Some people can't see because of their cataract. Some people need surgery and have been waiting for it. And this is an opportunity in a safe and controlled manner to slowly restart, cognizant of making the process safe, cognizant of getting the facilities up and running again, cognizant of the need to preserve our PPE. This is a gentle, careful start of normalising what is so important, the general health care needs of the community. In the aged care space, just a couple of comments. We are all concerned about the terrible tragedies that happen when you have a big aged care outbreak, and of course we understand the need to protect the residents, and that protection is best achieved by ensuring that nobody enters an aged care facility if they're in any way unwell. No staff member, no visitor, no one coming in for any other reason. You do not go into an aged care facility if you have the slightest respiratory symptom, a sore throat or a tickle. You stay away, and anyone who works at an aged care facility is eligible for a COVID-19 test and can get them. That's the most important thing. We've also really expanded our response in aged care outbreaks so that every resident and every staff member can be tested. But as the Prime Minister has said, it is not reasonable in a situation as we are now across pretty much the whole country where the community outbreaks are not in existence to lock poor residents away from their family. We've made a series of recommendations at HPPC previously that could make visits safe. We don't want lots of visitors. We want limited visitors, no more than 2 a day, and not for a long period of time, and with appropriate health screening, and visits to occur in a safe part of the facility. But it's not reasonable or fair to people who may have been used to getting their family coming every day, who may even have dementia in some cases, to be denied access to their family. So we're encouraging all providers to be proportionate, of course protect the residents, of course screen everybody coming to the facility, but don't lock residents away from their families.